The courtroom was already heavy with judgment before anyone spoke, the kind of air that presses down on the chest and makes even breathing feel like a decision. A young mother sat alone at the defense table, her hands folded too tightly in her lap, her eyes scanning faces she could not hear, only read in fragments. She was deaf, and her baby had been taken from her arms because the world decided her silence meant incapacity. The judge was moments away from ruling when 3 identical little girls were escorted inside. Their presence so unexpected it sent a ripple through the room, and what they were about to do would crack open a truth no one had prepared for. If you believe in kindness and second chances, and in the idea that love can exist beyond words, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel so stories like this can keep reaching hearts that still believe. The woman at the center of it all was named Elena, and until 6 months earlier, her life had been small but carefully held together by routines that made sense to her. She worked mornings at a local laundry, folded towels with precision, and smiled at customers who rarely smiled back. She lived in a narrow apartment with sunlight that hit the kitchen floor just right in the afternoons, and on the fridge were ultrasound photos she touched every day like proof that something miraculous had chosen her. When her son was born, tiny and red and perfect, she memorized his breathing patterns the way others memorize lullabies. She felt vibrations through her chest when he cried and learned his needs through touch, through instinct, through the ancient language of a mother's body. But the hospital saw something else. They saw forms not fully understood, interpreters arriving late, misunderstandings stacking up like quiet accusations. A social worker wrote down words like risk and concern, and before Elena could understand what was happening, her baby was gone, placed into temporary care while the court decided if a deaf woman could be a fit mother. The days that followed were an endless blur of silence and panic. Elena woke up reaching for a crib that was no longer there, her arms aching with a physical emptiness that refused to fade. She attended meetings where people spoke over her, even with interpreters present, their faces stiff with polite doubt. They asked how she would hear danger, how she would respond fast enough, how she could teach a child words she herself could not hear. Each question landed like a blow, not because she had no answers, but because no one seemed willing to see her answers as enough. She showed certificates from parenting classes she had taken long before giving birth, letters from her employer praising her reliability, and videos of her caring for her newborn under supervision. Still, the system moved forward, slow and cold, its gears grinding down her hope. What no one in that courtroom knew was that Elena had not raised a child for the first time when she became a mother. Years earlier, when she was barely more than a teenager herself, she had taken in 3 foster children no one else wanted. They were triplet girls, 6 years old, identical in face but wildly different in spirit, coming from a home so broken that fear had become their first language. Elena had been considered an unlikely placement then too, but desperation and a shortage of families had given her a chance. Over the years, she became their anchor. She taught them through patience and consistency, through sign language and written notes and shared routines. She learned their moods through footsteps and door slams, and they learned empathy by watching her navigate a world not built for her. Eventually, the girls were reunited with a distant relative when they turned 13, but they never stopped visiting Elena. She was not just a foster parent, she was their safe place. As Elena sat in court awaiting a decision that could permanently separate her from her son, the judge reviewed reports thick with professional language and thin on humanity. The state's argument leaned heavily on assumptions, on what Elena lacked rather than what she provided. The foster care representatives spoke confidently about best interests, about long-term stability, about potential harm. Elena watched faces, tried to follow lips, felt her heart pound so loudly she wondered if others could feel it too. She did not know that in the hallway outside, 3 young women were standing shoulder to shoulder, their hands trembling not with fear but with determination. The triplets were 19 now, tall and strong and unmistakably alike. They had heard about Elena's case through a mutual friend and drove overnight without hesitation. They requested to speak, unsure if they would even be allowed into the courtroom. When the door opened and they were escorted inside, their presence shifted the room. 3 identical faces, calm and steady, eyes locked forward with a quiet resolve that did not ask for permission. The judge paused, surprised, and allowed them to take the stand together, their testimony offered not as spectacle but as lived truth. They did not speak in dramatics or exaggeration. They spoke in careful sentences about a woman who could not hear but always listened. They described a childhood that had begun in chaos and found structure in Elena's home. They explained how she taught them responsibility, how she noticed things other adults missed, how her attention was never divided by noise or distraction. They told the court how Elena had saved one of them from a severe allergic reaction by noticing changes in breathing patterns, how she had advocated for them at schools that underestimated them, how her disability had never once translated into neglect. They spoke of love that was shown through actions, through consistency, through showing up every single day. The courtroom, so accustomed to expert opinions, fell into a different kind of silence, one filled with weight and meaning. The judge listened, not just with professional interest, but with something deeper stirring behind his eyes. He asked questions, and the triplets answered with clarity and grace. They provided records, photos, letters from teachers and counselors who remembered Elena as the foster mother who never missed a meeting, who learned systems others avoided, who refused to let silence become an excuse. The state's case began to unravel, not through argument but through undeniable evidence of a life well lived in service of others. Elena watched it all unfold, tears streaming down her face, understanding only fragments but feeling the shift like a change in weather. When the ruling came, it was not delivered with flourish, but with humility. The judge acknowledged the court's failure to see beyond disability, to confuse difference with danger. He ordered the immediate reunification of mother and child, along with formal apologies and mandatory training for the department involved. Elena collapsed into her chair, overwhelmed, her hands shaking as she tried to process what her eyes were telling her. Her son was brought into the room, placed gently into her arms, and she held him against her chest, feeling his heartbeat sync with hers like it always had. The aftermath did not end at the courthouse steps. Elena's story spread, not as a scandal but as a lesson. Policies were reviewed, procedures updated, assumptions challenged. The triplets returned to their lives, changed in ways they would only understand later, having stood up for the woman who once stood up for them. Elena returned home with her baby, the apartment brighter than it had ever been, the silence no longer a source of fear but a space filled with purpose. She continued working, continued parenting, continued proving through daily acts that love does not require sound to be strong. As time passed, Elena began mentoring other deaf parents navigating similar fears, her experience turning into guidance, her pain reshaped into advocacy. Her son grew, learning sign language as his first language, his laughter felt through vibrations and wide smiles. The world did not suddenly become kind, but it became a little more aware, a little more careful, because one case had forced it to look at its own blind spots. If this story has touched your heart, if it made you pause and reflect on the quiet strengths people carry, please take a moment now to like this video, share it with someone who needs a reminder of compassion, and subscribe to support stories that shine light where it's long been missing. Before this story ends, we have one special request for you. Please comment below with a single word that describes how this story made you feel, because your words help these messages reach more hearts that need them. In a world that too often measures worth by volume, Elena's journey stands as a reminder that the deepest forms of love are not heard but felt, not spoken but lived. And sometimes, it takes the courage of 3 young women, shaped by that love, to stand in a room full of doubt and tell the truth so clearly that even silence listens.